do things you know that need to get done, but nobody's doing them. So, and intelligence functions are good at that because I'll get to that in a second. Balancing short-term, the quarterly culture versus the longer-term 10-year horizons, that's very difficult. Garnering budgets, everybody has a problem with that. It's a universal thing, but in particular with the intelligence community, and I don't know if it's true here, but it seems like you guys hold the budget, so we have to beg for that money. And then, of course, when there's cuts mid-year, you're not cutting your budget, you're cutting our budget. So, and I think that, so it's a little bit a double whammy when it comes to competitive intelligence organizations. Earning and keeping, if you're fortunate to have a seat at the table, earning and keeping that seat at the table was number 7. Recruiting and retaining talent, as we've heard about that this morning. Very critical to keep the right talent, and especially when you're thinking about earning and keeping a seat at the table, you better have some people that can get to the table, stay at the table, give a point of view, and create value at the table. I used to do this at Codex all the time. We would have a list of the things we were looking for, and one of those was being able to communicate to executives, and we would just lay out those analytical horsepower, whatever it was, and say, what do we need? And I just rate ourselves every year, and then we go out and recruit those people. So now let's get to the top 5. Conquering information overload, you saw that in the previous slide. Managing networks. Our networks are when we collect intelligence, it's not like doing a market research project where you're sort of the turning the crank, here's the questions, go online, you fill out the answers, your screen, everything. We're collecting and managing networks both internally, trying to pull information in, and also externally. We're using our vendors and some key opinion leaders, all sorts of things going on. So it's very difficult to manage those networks. And then this one, I haven't heard this yet today in this meeting, but they were telling me you can't swing a cat without hearing somebody talk about machine learning and artificial intelligence. And this thing is, is it robot? Will the robot take our job? Well, I don't think so, but I did Google it. John said, go to that, and I anyway, didn't know what a competitive intelligence professional was, so I guess the robots are not taking our job. But I do see ourselves more as a trial lawyer. When we think about the defense and the prosecution, they're looking at the same information, and a lot of times, most companies are looking at the same information too. I mean, you might get an advantage of getting a glimpse of something that's coming that others don't get. But generally, you're looking at the same world. It's just how you're going to interpret and influence the jury being the board or whatever. So I think our jobs are not going away for that reason. Delivering on expectations, that's critical. Sometimes when you put the word intelligence out there, expectations go up. And then when you put the word competitive, no matter how hard you say competitive, they hear competitor and collars go up, and you're a spy now. And then the expectations of the competitor intelligence goes way up, and it gets to be unreasonable. You don't want to get into the trade secret area. So that's something that's okay. Drum roll. Did anybody have a guess what number 1 is? I mean, I don't know if you know anything about this, but you have a guess what number 1 might be? I heard it in this group yesterday.
Getting to insights.
Getting to insights is a good one. But the other thing was, I think some of that was buried in here, is explaining ourselves. What the hell do we do? And I heard that yesterday. What does a marketer do? But I think we know what marketing does more than we know what these guys do. So I call this supply side insight work. So we're trying to do supply side. There's a whole demand side, and I'll get to that in a second. Because my approach, I wanted to say, there was a little sidebar here in the survey. Whenever I heard the word insight, I went ahead and said, I'd write it down what they're saying. So we were all over the place. Some people said they had no value whatsoever. Then other people said, well, we don't even know what it means because it means different things to different people. That's terrible. You can't have a product like that. And then at the end of the day, it's cliche. Everybody's using it and it means nothing. This one at the upper Washington State area there, Northwest, it was about the fact that, we can get everything we need on the internet. Well, that's scary. And it was really scary to these people. Then on the other side, You have some more seasoned people talking about the fact that you always have to pivot information and intelligence to insight. You have to do that. And then you have to ensure, and this was more of a bragging statement, that our insights do influence strategy. And that's a key point. And over here, so you got to get to those insights, present choices, present those trade-off choices. And I'll get to that in a co-advance example. I've got an eye on the clock, so I'm still good. This is a great one. I loved it because it was one, she was on the verge of losing her job at a key healthcare consumer company. And here's what she said, and I thought I'd capture that, but that's it. You really are you're really under the pressure to create insights that make a difference. So we're not helpless out here. Liam's been around. Here's his book, and you go to the YouTube and get these goals on his, as he's interviewed. I forgot who interviewed Liam, but anyway, he makes these points. I think, and the book does do these three things. One, it gives you a platform of understanding of what insights are, both from a theoretical and a practical point of view. Secondly, it provides frameworks. It shows you how you can get there. It breaks down, inferences and information into inferences and implications. You can go around the horn there. And finally, and this is something that, in our community, intelligence, we think if we push it out there, everybody's going to use it. Well, it's not the case. You have to make it part of the culture on both the side of the supplier and the demand side to make it work, to make it executable. If that's a word. Okay, so here's my approach. Probably all wrong, shoot me down, whatever. But I'm going to call it a product. It makes it more simple to me. Insight is a product. It has, within the product, and within any product, is supply and demand issues, and I'll go through those. And finally, I'll give you, well, may not be one good example, but one good example is worth 1,000 theoretical considerations, so I threw that one up. So here we go. I think it was Socrates who said, the beginning of wisdom is the definition of terms. So here we start with the wisdom part. What is insight? If you look it up in the dictionary, you get the power, I like that word power, of seeing into a situation. That's pretty good. And then also, I love this term, the inner nature of things, and seeing intuitively. Sometimes I'm not sure it's always intuitive, but I think your intuition will always kick in. It's a part of that creativity, and there's logic there as well, but there is intuition at the end of the day. Does it make sense? But left field, no, Liam Fahey's definition, it's not out of left field here. A new understanding of some facet of the marketplace change that makes a difference. Okay, keywords there to me, and Liam, shoot me down again, is the new understanding, so it can't be something we already know. Second is this, it's a change. We sort of know there's going to be, that's probably the lowest hurdle we have to go over. There's change everywhere. And then the third one here, though, is it makes a difference. If it doesn't make a difference to your company, then this probably shouldn't be considered an insight. So that's the definition that we're working. That's the one straight out of the book. I've never heard Liam actually say it now, but I just did. So maybe we could get that in the back of, even in Hickory, North Carolina. So anyway, what is the positioning? It's very close to the positioning of intelligence. And intelligence is based, 20, 30 years ago when I first got into this, it's based on going and asking that executive what keeps you up at night. So the positioning statement is all about making sure that executive, he or she is able to rest at night and not rest with any worry. So constantly go to sleep, that things are working, the insights are being generated. So some of the wording here, you've got a complication here that we're living in a complex business environment, and you're seeking solutions for that work in the marketplace to give you differentiation. Insight is the only product, that integrates information from from multiple sources and also disparate sources. So it's not digital sometimes. It's very hard to get. In fact, and there was a sidebar on machine learning and AI from this group as well. But what they're saying is it's easy to take structured information, but it's very difficult even to merge external information with internal information to get that to work into some sort of insight that you can actually leverage. And I think one guy said, well, it's always outcomes. You have to keep your eye on the ball of outcomes, because and he's a Phillies fan. He said, they doubled down on big data and Moneyball, but the outcomes haven't changed. So you got to always keep your eye on the ball there for outcomes. And so, and there are pilots going on, but the pilots are not getting to the point of any insight. There's always that, the human factor for intelligence and insights is alive and well today, but it will be for probably another 20 years. How about that? Okay, and because, I think we've seen that even yesterday when Dan teed up, some of the top things that we're looking for in marketing. Insight was among the top 3. And it's also the one that I think we spontaneously come up with. And then also that, this is the emotional factor, as you well know. That's the emotional factor, is to get these executives to sleep well. Supply demand issues. This is taken right out of, it's paraphrased from Liam's book. But what I've tried to do here is, I'm on the supply side. I've seen the demand side, and I've been, I don't know, I guess I've never been on the decision-making side. So, but I've seen it, worked with it. And Liam has a list of questions that you ask, and I've paraphrased these questions and put them on either side of these goalposts and said, if you're looking at your organization and you want to test whether your organization has a capability of providing insight, you need to answer these questions. So on the supply side, is there a group charged with doing it? And that seems pretty obvious. Is there an assignment there? Because not many people have the spare time to go and do it on their own. Is there an analysis structure for insight? Do you have the right inputs? Do you have the right data? Do you have the right, like as I said earlier, analytical horsepower in your group to pull this thing off? Are the insights or implication insights, and we'll get to that definition in a minute, but is it more of the so what and the now what? Are they routinely developed? And a lot of times, and I have to say, even in our consulting business, it's much easier to throw the information out on a page and let you figure it out than to figure it out and then throw it out on a page. A lot more work to do it the other way. I always go back to Lincoln, I'm sorry this letter is so long, I didn't have time to write a short one. And it's so true. Do professionals enhance their skills? Do they go to conferences like this? Are they constantly honing and sharpening their skills? On the demand side, is it a focus of executive attention? I mean, executive attention might be an oxymoron, but does it come up at least fairly often? Is it a quarterly thing? Does it come up as an issue? And I don't know if I can't really think of insight itself coming up, but certainly tell me what you want us to do after you have this beautiful display of what the world looks like. The insight required integrated. Is it all the time, or is it some of the time? And there could be, you can give yourself good and bad grades on that. And then is it vetted and validated? Vetted is you come up with this, but you better check it with a number of channels. And you better have a network of people, even if use the executive network to test it. And I'll get to the example at Covance. It's exactly what we did. We had these ideas, but we tested it with expertise out there. Our customers, very thought leaders, and even analysts. And we influenced Wall Street with some of our insights. So then there are some that fell in between. Is there a shared understanding of what this thing is? I think that's critical, and it talks to those clouds that we saw earlier in our survey. And is it monitored and validated over time? So does it work? Can you track it? That sort of thing. That's all. Now, here's the one good example. Again, I'm not sure if it's good, but it's an example. So here we go. We're going to set this up. Covance, that's my former company. I worked with them for 10 years, from 2002 to 2012, basically. So when I entered, they're about a $500 million CRO, contract research organization. They do exactly that. They contract research, and I'll get to that in a second. But we're providing services to the pharmaceutical industry. The board was looking to set up, believe it or not, we were on a 5-year hiatus, no strategy, set up and then do it on an annual basis, do some strategic planning. The objective here is basically all we're asking is there enough gas in the tank in the pharma R&D spend, really, pharma industry, to get us to where we want to go? And at the time, I can't repeat where you want to go, but we want to get to $1 billion. I think everybody wanted to get to $1 billion, and I can tell you the rest of the story later. But that was the initial objective. And this whole thing started in 2004, and we continued for 8 years. And I can't say everything I talk about, there was an aha moment, and, I came out of the shower and there it was, It was a process. We continuously evolved and got more sophisticated with data, picking and choosing amongst data. And I can say outright that although there's a lot of vendors out there that try to explain pharmaceutical industry to pharmaceutical companies, there's nobody trying to figure this out. So we had to do it on our own. We had to sort of look at it, get a prism and look at the data this way and that way and say, what does it mean to us? And then I came on board in 2002. One of the board members was an ex-CEO at a pharma company. He really wanted an intelligence unit. And at the time, we were market research and competitive intelligence. And then we evolved into forecasting. But that's enough about that. This is a great mission. I put this in just a second ago because of about purpose. I was against this mission statement. It's a wonderful way to recruit people into your organization. We're helping bring miracles of medicine to the market sooner. So the only thing I didn't like about it, anybody want to guess? Go back to my career, education. Miracles. This is not a miracle, it's science. It's advanced of science. And the fact of the matter is, everybody that we work for, who are actually producing these miracles, these medicines, never call it a miracle. You don't, Merck, Pfizer, J&J, they don't call it a miracle. So a little bit of background, a little education. This is how drugs are developed. They start, basically, I'll tell you, in the first discovery is you're in glassware. You're taking your little drug and you're putting it in there and see if it works in some cell. I'm being very simple. Beth, close your ears here. And then preclinical, you say, okay, it made it out of there. We think we've got a hypothesis. We'll put it into some animals, rats. And, then dogs and stuff's on it. So they keep getting bigger until then finally they say, let's test it in phase 1 in clinical. And that's all you're doing there is to say, does it hurt anybody? So you're trying, then you'll move the dose up a little. And this minute you see a target organ being hurt, you stop. You said, that's your maximum tolerated dose. Then you ask, at some dose less than that, can you get efficacy? So you go into your target patient population, rheumatoid arthritis, eczema, whatever it is, you inject it in people, and it's a small population. So you're just seeing if it works, from a proof of concept. So then you get that point. Then you say, okay, now we have to really scale this up. We're looking at 3,000 patients if you're in eczema or whatever. Then you take all your stuff to the FDA. And you get approved. And then there's a market access section that says, you set your price. And then there's a whole black art to this. And you probably read the papers every day about how drugs are priced. The prices are way up here, but then they have to give rebates and all sorts of things go on. And they get tiered. And it's very complicated. And but anyway, it's key. So the key here, too, is Covance has services, unlike a lot of CROs, contract research organizations. We had services across the whole bit. And the good news here is everybody was saying R&D spending is always going to go like this. No problem, 10%. Well, when I came in, that everybody was saying for 5 years, 10 years, there's going to be 10% growth in R&D spend in the industry. And that was Goldman Sachs saying that. And that's when I came to believe that Goldman Sachs was hiring a lot of junior people that knew how to take a corner of an Excel cell of a spreadsheet, put in a CAGR and drag it all the way out over years, because that's all they were doing. So it was more sophisticated than that. I was in a Bayesian statistics, so excuse me, I put up the prior. This is what our belief set was before we went in, that everything was going to be the same. Goldman Sachs is saying everything's the same. So we had leadership here in something called Central Labs. And the reason why I sort of set that between here, anything clinical, there's a monitoring thing that goes on. You go and check the boxes at the investigator site, but there's also the pee in the cup, take the blood, all that stuff. And all that stuff comes to us. in Indianapolis, Indiana, and gets tested for basically tested for safety. You're looking for something that says this is certain people. So if you know, that's the way it looked coming in. Now, just another little education bit here. This is again from Liam. This is the third time I've referenced Liam. So he's not asleep yet either. So he talks about these change insights, and there are different types of change insights. And I'm going to bastardize this, but the domain insights can be customers, they can be regulators, they can be competitors, they can be NGOs, they can be anything. Just something that's happening out there that you believe is going to affect your market. The competitive space insight is just sort of what is it doing to this market? It's some of those domains synthesized. 1 + 1 = 2 here. So it's starting to be synthesized a little bit. And finally, beginning to the generic marketplace insights, where it says basically, this is affecting, aside from you, this is affecting the marketplace. So it's agnostic to your business, but it's affecting the marketplace. Liam, did I get it just about right? Okay. And then the real deal is made down here. Once you get all those insights and you've got some things you're saying about the generic marketplace, you say, now what does it mean to us? So basically it's sort of consultanese. It's what, so what, and then now what? So here's some of the stuff that I was looking at when we started. I think I'm still on time and can go through these. Some of the change domains in the domain insight were about customers and some competitors, but customers were facing some miserable times looking ahead. Even though Goldman Sachs had the projections out very well into the future, they had some patent expirations. They were pruning. There was going to be, those usually trigger M&A. So there's going to be some mergers out there. And when we saw mergers in the space of late, they were pruning their R&D, not doubling down on it. They were pruning it. It's becoming smaller. They were changing the mix within it. So they're moving towards biologics for various reasons, because there has less attrition, and they're also they're more targeted, and also they're less susceptible to generic pricing at the end of their life cycle. So there's a lot of good reasons to be investing and double down on biologics. So those were there. So late stage, are looking to cut costs, and we had some competitors coming in from other regions. What this says about the competitive space is competitors with later stage offerings are going to be better off. And you remember, we were back towards the early. We had the central labs bit, which is great, but we didn't have much in the late stage, which I'm jumping ahead a little bit. And also, we saw early on even in the late 90s, we saw direct competitors in the clinical space putting their offices everywhere. And it was a little bit premature, but they did it. Now they look very prescient. Use our term there. Emerging providers will challenge us. Okay, so obviously these emerging providers are going to challenge our model. We were very profitable, in the early space. So these challenges meant something to us. So in the generic marketplace, I mean, it's a terrible thing to say, but the value proposition for R&D has been devalued. I mean, executives are actually saying, you used to get 6 times on the dollar you invested. You're barely getting 60 cents on the dollar you invest. As we're turning into the first decade of the 21st century. And then our large customers were looking for greater productivity, and you know what that means, either get more throughput or at less cost, and there was going to be a big wave in biologics. The implications to us, we were totally misaligned with where the market was headed. This new normal was really a threat to us. Secondly, we had too much capacity in the tanking areas, and we had too little capacity in the growth areas. We were in trouble. So what does this mean? Our lab-based high-margin mindset must change. And I tell you, we had people coming from these businesses. They were stars. Their margins were like this, all the other margins. The CEO told me in my first meeting, he says, I hate people businesses. I hate it. We have a lab business, margins like this, people business, margins like that, and we're lucky to be profitable. And so we had to change that, because that's just a fact. We need to rebalance our portfolio. I think I pointed that out. We had to take advantage of those burgeoning reimbursement services. In other words, these biologics were coming out. We knew they were coming out, and they were coming out in record numbers. We predicted, even back when it was unprecedented, these FDA approvals are going to be gigantic, 40. We had 40 in our models, and nobody believed it, because the highest number up until that date was 26. We hit it right on the number. but absolutely, long after I was gone, I couldn't, stand up and take a bow. But yeah, it was amazing how accurate that was, because we just anticipated that these things were going to go faster through the pipeline. They were not going to be challenged, and boom, they hit the mark. But they were awfully expensive, as you well know. They're terribly expensive. And so the reimbursement services are very important, because you can't pay for them. Patients who are underinsured or not insured have to find some way to pay for them. And this is one of the ways that they do. You call somebody and they help you through the healthcare system. And finally, we need to look at our whole geographic footprint. So you remember our prior. It was this, and now where are we? This is quite easy. Obviously, I think I've already talked about this. We're going to have to find some way. We built facilities, we doubled down, we tripled down. We had enough capacity by then that we had enough. If we even with 100% market share, we weren't going to fill our capacity. That's how bad it was. So we actually had to divest. You were thinking about theme parks. Had this huge building where all the rats were, and we're thinking about changing it to some theme park if we could. Just kidding, but we needed to do something with that facility. We had screwed down so many assets, and we needed to lift them up, unscrew them, and sell them off to somebody. So that happened. In these areas, we just needed to double down, so we needed an investment. And then in these two, it was more, I think Dan mentioned this yesterday, it's more of a study area. We didn't really have a big footprint there, so we weren't really susceptible to big market shifts. But if we wanted to really get into the area, we needed to do something. And we ended up purchasing some stuff here. So anyway, and those are phase one. Remember those safety studies? You're going into volunteers just to see if there's anything wrong. So I'm finishing off my Bayesian statistical class. So the posterior was we needed to differentiate how we looked at these services. So the grading I gave myself, since I'm on the supply side, thumbs up on most everything. On the demand side, I would say we had it, but we were inconsistent. We probably didn't use the language. And finally, I'm not sure we ever had a shared understanding, but we certainly had shared targets and all that. At the end of the day, I don't know if I have this to do. We used to track it. So I used to track. There are a lot of factors that basically the breadcrumbs and the Bayesian events that we're predicting. There are breadcrumbs that you could track and say, well, if our assumptions and our insights were right, then this is the track we should be on. So we could track that for the executives, all these factors that we had predicted based on those assumptions. And we could tell them on a quarterly basis how we were tracking. We were right, wrong, and was there a problem? And, what does that do to an executive? Makes them sleep better at night, right? And so that's, it made reporting a lot easier. But here's the key takeaways. I think there's some work to be done on both sides, and not least of which is just a common understanding of what this is. We have tools available, not least of which is Liam's book. And, I really do think there's hope in this area. I think there's evidence that it can work, not least of which is the Codex example that I just gave. So that's all I wanted to say, and just about on time, I think.
Thanks, Mark. We're going to take questions.
Good.
That's great. Yes, so now we're going to have John